Hello, I'm Simon Whistler. You're watching Today I Found Out, and in the video today we're answering a viewer question. Ron G asks, what do hospitals do with limbs of people they amputate? Like, if I have a limb amputated, can I ask for it back? So it's standard procedure in most hospitals to incinerate any limbs, organs, or tissue that they remove from a non-organ donor patient. However, just because this is the way things are normally done, it's not necessarily the way it has to be done. For example, while there almost universally doesn't seem to be any law saying you have rights to an amputated limb after a doctor removes it, in many cases you can ask for anything cut off or removed from your body back from the hospital, and they'll usually say yes if pressed on the matter. Even where laws exist, they tend to be less about how to handle such tissue and more about getting around potential lawsuits. For example, in California, there is a law stating that patients cannot sue after the fact for the return of tissue used in medical research or for a share of the profits if the tissue removed leads to a medical breakthrough. We're actually going to touch more on this a little bit later in the bonus fact section, so do stay tuned. That said, prior to any surgery, hospital representatives will invariably ask patients to sign a form that cedes ownership of their surgical leavings. They are usually left to the pathology lab for use in medical research or study. However, as a patient, you are entirely within your rights to not sign such a form and request ownership of any piece of your body removed during surgery. But as previously alluded to, hospitals and doctors won't always make this easy for you and will often tell you that it isn't possible owing to removed bits being a bit of a biohazard. While this sounds like a totally reasonable explanation, in truth this is usually just something hospital representatives say when a hospital has a policy against returning removed bits, generally from wanting to avoid jumping through the additional effort involved in returning a body part. As lawyer and author of The Law of Human Remains, Tanya Mash notes, when they don't want to do something, they'll tell people it's illegal. That doesn't mean it's illegal. A lot of people just cave when they're told it's not permitted. Or as PBS succinctly states, unless a piece of removed tissue contains a communicable disease or virus, keeping your own body parts isn't inherently any more dangerous than keeping a steak. And even if you have a communicable disease, the common practice of preserving the tissue or limb submersed in a solution of water and formaldehyde will usually kill off any such diseases. This makes the often claimed biohazard excuse for not returning your body part generally pretty bogus. For example, you can consider the case of Christy Loyal, who, upon being told she needed to have her foot amputated owing to cancer, she asked the hospital for it back, only to be stonewalled by doctors who told her that this wasn't possible. Nevertheless, she insisted, and after hounding the hospital about the issue for several weeks, they agreed to return it. It's also noteworthy here that while they initially said it wasn't possible, the hospital actually had a liability release form on file specifically for use when returning removed body parts. After signing the form and getting her foot and part of her leg back, Loyal paid $650 to a private company to skeletonize it. Hilariously, she actually maintains an Instagram account called One Foot Wanderer, where she takes various photos with said foot, such as this glorious shot of her using her skeletonized foot as a golf club. When asked if she had any advice for people who similarly wanted to keep an amputated limb, Loyal explained that it was important to just be persistent and keep reminding everyone that you are getting it back. As for exactly what condition you'll get your limb, organ, or tissue back in, this will usually depend on the tests the pathologist conducts on it and the manner in which it is removed. Things like kidney stones, for example, will normally be destroyed by the tests performed on them after the fact, if not the method used to remove them in the first place. Because of this, while you can theoretically ask for anything removed from your body back, occasionally this really won't be possible. But where possible, and if you do insist, the general process is that the organ, tissue, or limb will be sent off to a pathology lab. Among other things, this will be to ensure that it's kept pathogen-free. It will also be preserved in some way, usually, as mentioned, in a solution including formaldehyde. You will also have to sign a liability release form before it will be returned to you. Once back in your possession in most regions, you're free to do with it as you please. One man, Leo Bonton, even created a rather fetching, if a little creepy, lamp out of his leg. As for what happens if you're interested in selling your former body part, with a few exceptions, this is largely entirely within your rights, as there aren't really very much in the way of regulations in the United States and many other countries about the ownership or sale of human remains. The exception to this in the United States is primarily regarding the sale or ownership of Native American remains, which are protected by the Native American Graves Protection and Repatriation Act. Do take note, though, that if you live in the states of Louisiana, Georgia, or Missouri, that they do have some specific laws pertaining to restricting the sale of body parts. Over in the United Kingdom, things are only slightly different, with the decision of what to do with the amputated limbs and removed tissue being left to the discretion of the hospital trusts and, in some cases, the individual surgeon performing the amputation itself. However, as long as the patient makes their wishes clear and signs the necessary forms, in most cases one shouldn't have significant issue getting the bits of yourself back. Also, as in the United States, tests need to be performed to ensure the tissue or limb doesn't pose a public health risk, and it will need to be properly preserved before being returned. One thing that is different in the UK, though, is that due to a quirk in British law, one of the few things a patient can't do with an amputated limb once they get it back is have it cremated at a licensed crematorium. As noted in a paper published in the BMJ, formerly British Medical Journal, in the paper Dr. Simon Marlowe also muses over the fact that although you can't legally have a crematorium cremate your limb after it's amputated, you could ask for it back and burn it yourself. And of course, if the limb is not going to be used for medical research, hospitals themselves almost universally will incinerate the limb anyway, which is all perfectly legal. It's just the crematoriums that can't do it. But to sum up here, it would seem in most regions of the world, as long as the bits of you removed don't pose a significant health risk to the general public, while many a doctor or hospital, particularly research hospitals, may resist if you ask for a body part back, if you're insistent enough, you'll likely have good luck in having it returned. And once you have it back, for the most part, you're pretty free to do with it as you please. Now, obviously, losing a limb is nearly always less than ideal, unless I suppose you have body integrity identity disorder, but for those who persist on finding the positive in any situation, if the aforementioned Christy Loyal is any indication, there are a lot of hilarious things you can do with your severed limb. And I have some bonus facts. The general lack of laws concerning what you can do with body parts can result in a number of unique quandaries, such as in the case of a South Carolina man, John Wood, who left his leg in an old barbecue smoker after having it amputated in the hopes of someday having it buried alongside him when he died. This plan was cut short when the barbecue was purchased by another man, Shannon Wisenant, when Wood fell on hard times. Indeed, Wood failed to remember that he had put the leg in there and never removed it from the barbecue. After having the police confirm that the leg wasn't part of a murder case or some other foul play, Wisenant had the leg embalmed and began charging neighbors to look at it, prompting a furious Wood to sue him to have the leg returned. The problem was that although the leg unequivocally once belonged to Wood, Wisenant was now its legal owner. The case was eventually settled on the Judge Mathis show, with Wisenant being ordered to return the leg and Wood being ordered to pay Wisenant $5,000 for it. And now for another bonus fact. The California law stating that patients can't sue after the fact for the return of tissue used in medical research or for a share of the profits if the tissue removed led to a medical breakthrough was solidified by the Supreme Court of California in 1990 after a hairy cell leukemia patient called John Moore discovered that, without his knowledge or consent, cells from his body were used to develop a new treatment to help those being treated for cancer and various other conditions. In a nutshell, doctors discovered that his cells were producing a protein that stimulates the growth of white blood cells. Ultimately, the doctors involved were able to use his cells to develop a cell line used for creating the protein GM-CSF, which in turn is used to boost the immune system of those undergoing cancer treatments and other instances where such a boost can be beneficial. Moore became suspicious that something weird was going on, owing to the doctors having him fly down to California from Washington on a monthly basis for years, continually taking blood samples, despite there being no medical reason for this to happen so frequently. The whole thing got even weirder after he asked to have his checkups transferred to a local doctor, and the doctor in charge of Moore's care, Dr. David Gold, countered by offering to pay all of Moore's travel expenses for each visit to LA. Eventually, Dr. Gold asked Moore to sign a consent form which stated, "I voluntarily grant to the University of California all rights I or my heirs may have in any cell line or other potential product which might be developed from the blood and or bone marrow obtained from me." Even still, they did not tell him why they wanted him to sign this, nor that they were already using his cells. It wasn't until Moore hired an attorney to look into the matter that the attorney discovered a cell line had been developed and patented using Moore's genetic material, and further, that Dr. Gold had been granted 75,000 shares in the patent. Further, his group was given $330,000 for exclusive access to Moore's genetic material. Moore thus argued that he was entitled to a share of the profits, not just because it was his genetic material used, but also because, had he been informed in the first place, he could have potentially sold his genetic material to other labs or companies wanting to do similar research on his blood. Despite all of this, the ruling of the court went against Moore, primarily because doctors have long regularly used samples from patients for research, with one of the judges noting that allowing patients to sue in this way would create a litigation lottery that could kneecap medical research in an unprecedented manner. Thus, while isolated instances may seem a bit unfair, in the end, a greater societal good is achieved by allowing such research without a lot of red tape. The California Supreme Court did, however, note that doctors needed to inform patients when using their tissue for research. In the end, even though the court did not order it, as a sort of apology, UCLA Medical Center paid Moore's legal fees because he wasn't informed about what they were doing with his cells each time they were having him fly down, and he hadn't agreed to allow his cells to be used for research. So I really hope you found that video interesting. If you did, please do hit that thumbs up button below, and don't forget to subscribe. Brand new videos just like this every day of the week. Also, over there on the right, a few videos from the archives, and as always, thank you for watching.